All right, everyone. Welcome to another day of Code Platoon, and today we are going to be going deeper into React Router and seeing React Router hooks. We're going to learn about the useParams and useNavigate hooks. And then the second part of our lesson, we'll learn about the useOutletContext hook and talk a little bit about React context and what it is, and we'll see an alternative way to share data than passing it through prompts when we're using React Router. And the way we're going to do this for most of today is we are going to build a Game of Thrones app, not unlike the Rick and Morty app you all are working on. And we'll be using the Game of Thrones API to get character information and display it. And in fact, I'll just pull the API docs up here so we have it. And just to take a preview so we can sort of see, we have a GET request that will get us all the characters. And I see a question in just one moment.
It's just screen. I just see if you wanted to share.
Oh, say that again.
Do you want to share your screen? I think you were trying to. I didn't see what you were showing.
Oh, are there multiple shares going right now, folks? Let's do this one more time. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Got it.
perfect.
Thanks.
Was it not there a moment ago?
I saw it.
Okay. All right. Well, perfect. Even better. Now everyone's got it. And actually, on that note, I should drop in. It would help if I dropped in the links for the Game of Thrones API. And Cody, thank you for the check-in and the API documentation as well. So let's just drop that right in here. And most of this is what we expect. Right? There's a GET request to get a particular character by ID. You just get whatever character has an ID of 2. We see that would be Jon Snow. I'm curious who has the ID of 1. And Samuel Tarley has that honor of the ID of 1. We'll probably use a little bit of Bootstrap, but we're mostly going to be focusing on React Router. And if we pull up the React Router docs, let's just take a quick look at the hooks that we're going to be learning about in this first part of the lecture. So hooks are a React concept. It's a fancy word for a function that does stuff. In particular, what hook functions do is they give us access to the more complex and powerful behaviors of React and other applications, right? Like useState sort of lets us hook into React component state inside a component. And we are going to be looking at the useNavigate hook, use navigation or useNavigate if I can find it over here. And what we'll see is useNavigate basically does the same thing that the link component does. It lets us navigate to different routes in our app, and React Router will drive our app there. So that whether it's in a button or later when we learn Django and authentication and you're writing full stack apps with user authentication, when a user logs in, you might want to redirect them to the home page, right? Or when a user logs out, you might want to redirect them somewhere. And we want to use our React Router routing to do that. And the useNavigate hook will help us accomplish that. The other hook we'll be looking at in part 1 of the lecture is useParams, which is great because this lets us get the params from a URL. And we'll see how this lets us make our applications more powerful. Because now, if say I have ID equals 5 as a query param here in my URL bar, with this hook, I can grab it and use that ID to say make an API call to get some data in my code. Outlet context is super cool, a little bit more complex to talk about. So I'm not going to talk about it now, and we'll get to it in part 2 of the lecture. Does anyone have any questions before we dive in and do a little planning of our Game of Thrones app and start writing code? Okay, awesome. So we're going to want to build a couple things for our Game of Thrones app. And I'm just going to make a couple pages just so we can kind of see what's going on here. And I think what I'll do is I'm going to use like a blue oval to represent the URL bar. And let's make this, I'll just sort of put this up here so we can put in what routes these are for. Or instead of an oval, let's make this some other shape that's a little, let's just make it a blue rectangle, in fact. So that will be our URL bar. We're going to want some sort of header that will be there consistently on every page. And we're going to want a home page. We're going to want an about page. We're going to want a characters page. And let me go ahead and just start making some of these. And the home page is going to be pretty simple for now. As will the about page. Where things start to get a bit more interesting, I think, is, let's say, all characters. Because what we're going to want here is we're going to want some sort of individual card for each character. Right, so we might need a component that we can reuse so we can show a number of characters. We're going to want to look at an individual character. I'll just call this character. And we're not going to need cards because we're going to show the character information there. And we'll get into this into the second part of the lecture, but we'll want a favorites page so that I can star my favorite characters and have a list of them as well. And so just like with all characters, this is going to show multiple characters on the same page. So we're going to need to use that character card component again. And now if I step back, I see I've done a good bit of design, right? And let me bring these folks over here. And let's start talking about the routing, right? Let's do a little planning here as long as we're doing this. So for the home page, the route is just going to be our base route for the URL, right? For the about page, it's going to be about. For all characters, maybe we just want to call this characters plural. And then for a single character, what should the route be here? If we're going to make a page for a single character. So if I'm looking at Daenerys, you know, the URL, if I'm going to write it out in full, HTTP localhost 5173 character, right? That would make sense. But how do I add like the individual character that we're looking at here? Anyone have any thoughts? Erica, yes.
Component with the character details, like character detail.
Yes, we're going to get there. But right now, I just want to do some really high level design and think about the different routes I need to create. So like when I go to look at Daenerys, what should the URL look like for the character page? Eric, yes, sir.
Maybe like /ID.
Yeah. And Erica, that's very much what we're going to end up building. This is more just some upfront design that I want us to do so we can start thinking about our programs at a higher level. And then we have a really nice design when we start doing work, right? And so, to copy this text, what we end up with is, since each character has an ID here in the API, I can have that same ID here for Samwell or Jon Snow or Daenerys or whomever. And what we'll learn is how to use the useParams hook to grab that and actually dynamically update what we show here on the page. So I just want to check in and see if that makes sense to folks and if folks have any questions. And then favorites is pretty straightforward, right? We're just going to call it favorites. So now I haven't written a line of code, but I actually have a really clear plan for how I want to go about building this. I've identified a number of components I'm going to need to create. I'm going to need some cards. So now we can start diving in to do work. So the way I recommend going about work is always do your setup first. As you write code, don't write code for something that doesn't exist yet. That might break or cause an error. So we're going to do our setup, and that's going to include making directories, install dependencies, and what I call skeleton code, which is we're not fully fleshing out the features, but I want to write just enough say so that React Router is working, even if the routing is really boring and isn't doing much. So that everything is kind of hooked up and ready to go. And actually, let's talk through this. I know that I'm going to need a components directory, so I'll go ahead and make that right now. And I know I'm going to want pages directory, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now as well. I've already gone ahead and removed all the boilerplate code from this project. So we can move right on to dependencies. And can someone remind me, what are my dependencies that I need to install if I want to use React Router and Bootstrap? And I have a randomized list of folks here. So I'm just going to start rolling down the list. Murad, what dependencies do I need to install? What do I need to run npm install for React Router and Bootstrap?
I need to install first the route, and we need to install the Bootstrap, and we need to install the Axis.
Yeah, that's a great call about Axios. I totally forgot that one. We're definitely going to want to use Axios later.
Yeah.
I'm going to need to install, React Router. And then for Bootstrap?
Yeah, install Bootstrap.
Oh, Erica, yes.
Can you not just npm install Axios, React Router, DOM, and Bootstrap in the same line?
I can. And in fact, we're going to do that right now because when we install Bootstrap, we actually have to install these two packages, Bootstrap and React Bootstrap. Right. And I know you were going in that direction, Murad, and that was awesome. And thank you for kicking us off with the questions. So the way I'm going to do it is I'll kind of ask the question, and then kind of if there's silence, I'm just going to go to the next person on my list. If I call on you, the rule of the game is you can always phone a friend, right? Like being like, hey, I'm not sure, I want to phone a friend is always a legit answer. That's why we're doing it as a class, as a group. So my dependencies are installed. Skeleton code, Bootstrap, React router, and I want to see some sort of hello world, right? So can someone tell me what do I need to do to set up Bootstrap once I've installed it? What configuration steps do I need to do? Erica.
You mean within the file, or like because you just installed it already?
Yep, I just installed it. With Bootstrap in particular, there's something I need to do before I can say like import a navbar or anything
Oh
to
yeah,
use
you
it.
mean to add it to one of the, yes, to add it to, I forgot where you added. You add not to main. Was it to main? Import the Bootstrap, the line that's import.
Yeah, exactly. We
Yes.
need to import the
Haha.
Bootstrap CSS.
Yes, I don't remember the entire line, but it's a line. It's a very
That
long
is
line.
okay. Yeah, I'm not gonna go that hard on you all. That is awesome. Thank you. And Murad, yes, sir.
I just wanted to say the same thing. We're gonna import the bootstrap inside the main and go to the bootstrap inside the node modules and import the bootstrap dest CSS bootstrap. I remember something like that. Yeah,
Yep,
from here.
exactly. Exactly. And I should see Bootstrap here inside my node modules, but I'm not. npm install Bootstrap. Because I never quite remember the name of this file. Oh, Gary, what's up? Let me make sure I'm in the right directory. And in fact, I'm in the wrong directory, folks. So common mistake. And the way I knew it was I kept looking in node modules for Bootstrap to make sure I was getting the file name right, and I wasn't seeing anything. So easy fix here. We're just gonna delete the node modules directory. We're gonna delete package everything .json. We're gonna navigate into Game of Thrones. We're gonna run npm install Axios, React router DOM, Bootstrap, React Bootstrap, and install our dependencies one more time. And now here in node modules, I see what I was expecting. Bootstrap and yep, dist/css/ bootstrap.min.css. And I'm going to get rid of React strict mode because it causes double renders, which are nice for certain kinds of debugging, but a little frustrating for us. And I'm going to run npm run dev to spin up my app. And let's go ahead and open this up. And can someone tell me, how can I confirm if Bootstrap is set up successfully? Can we tell just from looking at the page right now? Brandon, yes, sir.
Yeah, the font has changed, so you set it up correctly.
Yeah, exactly. I see the font change, so I know that Bootstrap is now good to go. So this is awesome, right? We've got our directories. We've installed our dependencies. Bootstrap is set up. Now let's tackle React Router, right? Because React Router has a couple different steps. And can someone remind me, like, what are the steps I always have to do with React Router without even worrying about, like, you know, making a route for the about page or anything like that, just to even get it to work? Len, yes, sir.
Um, Imported. I mean, we've done the imports already.
We've installed it.
Then you start the const router the creating the paths in the main JSX?
Close. You're absolutely right. We have to create that router.jsx file.
Well, no, in the main JSX, you do the let me look at the code here.
If you're not sure, phone a friend.
No, I was looking at what we've already imported here. So are we on main? We're on main. We're here importing. So we have to import React Router DOM. I don't see that in there.
Okay. I think Daniel's hand up as well. I
Okay.
think you got the ball rolling, Len, but in the interest of time, I need to keep us moving.
Sure.
Yeah, totally. Daniel, yes, sir.
Yeah, I was gonna say about what Len said. Give me a sec. So we have to create what Len said, create a const router.
Yep.
Yeah, and after that, I believe it's something like browser router. You know, you
Yep.
have to
We
make
have
it.
to import this function, create browser router from React Router DOM. And what do I do with create browser router?
You have to put it in, I believe, an array or a list,
Yep.
and then this is where you can go ahead and create your paths in here.
And do you want to walk me through creating our path for app.jsx, or do you want to phone a friend?
Yeah, I can give it a shot. We can so we have to start with path,
Okay.
right? Path, and then we would do we would want to be the root or the so it'd be like a what was a backslash.
Yep. Exactly. Our root path.
And then is this where we put the name of our path?
If you're not sure, you can phone a friend.
Yeah, I'm gonna phone Brandon Yo.
Or you're so done. What was the question again? You put
Yep, we're creating our router, and I want to create the routing just for app.jsx.
you do path that and then element is app. And then you have to import app. And then this should have children, but I think this should suffice.
Yeah, we don't have any children yet, right? So I'm just when we do have children, what would put here? What would we put here?
You would put the other paths, like path whatever else, and then element, and then that page. So you
Like,
put an array.
yeah, I would put an array. And for now, we're not going to put anything in the array, so we'll just have it commented out like this.
You also need to export default.
Perfect. Thank you. You
Yeah.
took the words right out of my mouth. All right. So this is one part of our setup. I see a couple hands up. Murad, I know your hand up. You had your hand up before. Murad, now that I've created router.jsx, what's the next setup step I need to do with React Router to get it to work?
I have to create first the component, like the about the whatever we're gonna navigate to. So
We
then
are
we
going to need
can
to do
put,
that, but there's
yeah,
something we need to do even before we do that, just to use the router at all. And we need to do it
uh,
here in main JSX.
yeah,
And if you're
the
not sure, you can
export,
phone a friend.
export, export default. We
Uh,
have to, yeah, export it.
we've exported the router, and then what do I want to do with it?
Here in the main, we have to import
And
the
just in the
browser.
interest of time, my apologies, just in the interest of time to keep it rolling, I see a couple other hands up. So let me just move on. And folks, I am going to call them folks, but
import router provider.
yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Love it. We have to
use it
import
here.
router provider and Brandon N. Now, once we've imported router provider, what do I do with it, Brandon?
You want to swap out the app for router provider and then pass router as a prop into router provider.
Yeah, exactly. And more, like you were saying before, and my apologies, in fact, I did not import the router. And now we've got the router. So now, fingers crossed, something is working here, right? I see Game of Thrones. If I go to components, I see all this router provider stuff. So React Router is hooked up, right? We don't have any children of our route yet, right? We don't have, these don't go anywhere. You know, if I do about, it doesn't go anywhere. And actually, if I want to, and let me ask, I think Chris, I saw your hand up. Chris, if I want to change this error message and I want to show like a custom error page, how do I do that in React Router? And if you're not sure, you can phone a friend.
Gotcha. You have to, I want to say it's, I have the notes here for that. So you want to put, is it, I know, is it some type of error message in the router direct, list here. So on line 10, you put, is it setup? I don't think this is it though. Is it setup no events? Okay. Yeah.
Not quite. It looks like Garrett, do you want to take a crack at it?
After the children array, you would put error element.
Yeah, and in fact, we don't even have children yet. And for JavaScript objects, it doesn't matter what orders these are. So we're going to add error element. And then what do I need to put here to set the error element property to?
It would be whatever your not found page is.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go ahead and create a not found page. And I'm going to use that awesome React snippets extension that Mikhail mentioned that will just create the skeleton of a component for me. And then Garrett, like you were saying, we need to import not found page, and we can use it right here. And of course, it would help if I closed my tag. And now, when I go to a route that doesn't exist yet, I see our not found page. Awesome, and thank you, folks. Chris, yes, sir.
What was that shorthand key?
That's, I don't want to get into that now.
RFCE.
Yeah, RFCE.
RFC, gotcha.
Yeah, React Functional Component Export.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, Mikhail, if you could throw that link again in the Slack chat, that would be awesome.
Yeah, it's not going to work without the extension, Chris. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah. No, I think folks are tracking. All right, so we've got our skeleton code set up. We've got React Router set up. We've got Hello World set up, and we even got an error page set up. So if I hop back to my design, now I can kind of start building this out. And before I get to the API stuff, I just want to make like a home page, an about page that don't say much, but are just really simple. So in fact, if I'm going down my list, Joseph, could you maybe walk us through step one of making the homepage so that when I'm here, I see homepage show up and it's happening by using React Router. And if you're not sure, you can phone a friend.
So you create your homepage.jsx in your pages.
Yeah, exactly. Let me go ahead and make a homepage page. And indeed, RFC is the shortcut there, which is super useful. All right, and now that I've made a homepage page, what do I do next?
You would import it into router.jsx.
Yep. And what after that?
And then add it as a child of the root.
Yeah, exactly. And how do I add it as a child?
So you would create the path
like this?
And then you would add the, in quotations, homepage /
You're on the right path. I'm pushing you a little bit because I think being able to like communicate well about this stuff is really important for technical interviews. What kind of thing is inside the children array? Do we put strings? Do we put other arrays? Do I put components? Do I put objects? What goes in there?
I'm gonna call on Erica.
Sounds good. Erica.
It's a dictionary. You have to put an index in there.
Yeah, exactly. A JavaScript object, very similar to a Python dictionary. And then Joseph, like you were saying, inside that object, I put path, right, as a property on that object, right? Or like a key for a dictionary.
Yes.
And I think I'll just make it about. And then what else do I need to add here for this route?
They need to add the element. And then
Yeah,
you'd put that in a JSX fragment, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. Yeah, thank you, Joseph, and thank you, Erica. Right. And just to reiterate, note that this is the same kind of object, path element. And as we saw the other day, we could put children here as well. If I wanted to, I could have an error element in here as well if I wanted to show a different kind of error message off of the about page for some reason. Murad, yes, sir.
Why did you make the path about with the element homepage? Why didn't make it like we created in the beginning? Yeah. And why you didn't create? Why didn't hook up the homepage? Okay.
I apologize.
As index true for the slash.
Yeah. You're totally right. Thank you so much.
So we don't need to make the path. We make it index to true. So we don't need to put this home in the URL, right? Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Even better. Thank you so much, man. And Joseph, my apologies. I got a little confused there. I got mixed up between the homepage and the about page like halfway through. So I apologize about that, folks. And Murad, you hit the nail on the head. Right. Let me just put this here. If I want the homepage to be what gets rendered by default, I don't need to add a path. I can just say index true. And I think there's something I'm doing wrong because I'm not seeing it show up. Oh, of course. So why isn't homepage showing up? Chris, yes, sir.
Did you export it?
I did export it.
Can you go back to homepage, just see what you have?
I can. The issue is actually not in homepage.
Oh,
yeah.
Let me phone a friend. Let me see. Gary.
My bad. Outlet.
You got it. I totally forgot about the outlet. And in fact, I would recommend adding an outlet to app.jsx as part of like the skeleton setup. And now we've got the homepage showing up. Murad, yes, sir.
I just want to say if we want to make any page as a parent for child, we have to put outlet in this page, right?
Correct.
Because I tried that last night, yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise it won't show up.
Like
Yeah.
in characters, we have child characters, or yeah, like 4 characters from characters. So we have to put in characters page also outlet. So it can.
That
I
is a
tried
little
that.
bit of a different situation. I would have to see the code. If you're using React Router for child routes, then yes. But there are other ways to do that with React Router, so I would just have to see the code.
Okay,
but
thank you.
You're welcome. If I have children in React Router, I need to put an outlet in the parent component. Right? And in fact, let's go ahead and do a quick little diagram on this because this is a good one. And let me go ahead and pull up the diagram that I want to use. Just one moment here, folks, so I can pull up my reference. Yeah, because you raise a good point. And I think we'll add to this diagram as time goes on. And I'll make this just a bit less big. But I'm going to make the app a circle just so we can visually identify it as being special because it's the sort of the parent. And there are different children components, right? Like if I hop over here to the app component, this H1, let's just pretend for now that this is, our header. So as a child, app has the header, and I'll just make these rectangles. And as a child, app also has outlet. Right? But outlet is just a little special. So I think I'll make it red. And then outlet has a number of children as well. And let's move this whole thing up here a bit so we have room. And right now we just have a home page. And essentially the outlet does an if statement and says, hey, if the path is this, render the home page. And let's use, where is the shape that I'm looking for? We'll just use this kind of shape. Or I'll just use like a diamond to show that these are rendered by the outlet. And I'll make this black. And so this is our homepage, right? And what I got confused about and what we're about to do is we're about to build the about page next. And we'll add more pages as we go. But so you can kind of see here's the tree structure of our React app, right? We have the app component that has these still children header and outlet. And let me just do this to save us a little space. And outlet basically does some if statements or sort of like a switch case and says, hey, based on the route, let's render a different page. And I think let me go ahead and build out the about page just so we can get it going. And then I think I want to take a short break and then we can build out some of the interesting stuff with calling the Game of Thrones API. And I might drive that one a little more now that we've kind of done a bit more review to introduce the patterns that we want to use and introduce the React router useParams and useNavigate hooks. But let's go ahead and build this about page. And I think then maybe it's a good time for a short break. So just like we did before, we're going to make this about page file. Use that React functional component with the default export for the about page. And we're going to add it here to the router. And again, this is where I'd gotten confused before. And Joseph, you were on the right path with the about page. And if I hit enter like that, VS Code will import it for me. And so now I should have a home page and an about page. Murad, yes, sir.
I have question and suggestion. Okay, we need to create the nav bar first. Okay, as long as the nav bar will be with us in each page, right? So we need to add it to the create it and add it to the app. And my question is, when you put the path, okay, the path like here for about, shall we put the slash at the end of the about? And why you put slash? Because when I create my app, I didn't put the slash at the end and it worked.
Yeah, that's a good question. I believe it will work fine just like this without the slash. I do this as a habit because not for the about page, but for a different page, if it ends up having children, that adds more to it. I want to have, about slash team or about slash company. So just as a habit, if you add the slash at the end, then it will be added to the path. I'm not 100% if it will break without the slash.
We don't need it even for the children. If we have children from the about, because I put children under about or under, the characters, I made like 4 children and it didn't need to add the backslash. When I added the backslash, it didn't work. It gave me errors. When I chat GPT it said you have to remove the backslash.
Got it. Let's actually see what happens here. If so you're right. We don't need the slash at the end. We may not need the slash at the end of path. Let me check and follow up on that. I see a couple of hands up. Are these questions around this, or does someone have an answer to this question, or is it for something else?
I believe that my group had this discussion in stand up, and I wanted to share what we found.
Awesome. What did you all find out?
So when you put a forward slash to a path, and then you have no forward slash on a child path, it'll append the URL rather than change the URL to. So like for example, if you did cats forward slash and then in about you had just about, it would do cats forward slash about. Like it would append the URL rather than change the URL.
Yes, that is a good point, and it does touch on some gotchas that can happen with the link attribute. Let me, if you can find the relevant bit of the React Router docs and share that, Brandon, that would be awesome. I will look for that as well, either during the break at the end of the lecture to share to folks so we can have a definitive answer. but I believe that's correct. And there's definitely a gotcha with the slashes with link. And I think maybe that's useful to look at. Yeah, so I would recommend putting the slash on at the end, and let me follow up to make sure that I can give like an accurate answer to that question.
So I'm sorry, I froze for like 30 seconds. You don't need a path to the home page just because it opens the home page, correct? Automatically for the first
No,
element?
we
No?
have this index true
Yeah.
here. If I
Okay.
didn't have that, I would need to give a path.
Okay. Thank you.
Index true tells React Router homepage, render it automatically for app at this root path.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. And in fact, let's go ahead. Let's create a nav bar. I'm just going to call it a header, and then we can kind of see some of these things in action.
I'm sorry, I have a question, very important.
Could you hold it? And let's see, it's 5 till. Yeah, I apologize. Let's hold questions. Let me build the nav bar so we can add the links, and then we'll break and I can take questions. Thank you, folks. So if I go to the app.jsx, we want to replace this header. And let me go back here. And in fact, let me make sure I removed cats from my routing. And Murad, let me just build out the nav bar, and then we can dive into questions. And let's go ahead. Let's just create a component. Let's just call it header this time around, just to mix it up. And I'm gonna put a couple things in here. I think inside these divs. Oh, and let me fix my code so it's not super broken. First of all, we're going to say header. And maybe I'll just put that in like an H1. And let's just use the HTML nav attribute so we can list out some links in here. And can someone remind me, if I want like a link to the about page, how would I add that here so that React Router will take us to the about page? Murad, yes, sir.
We can import it from the Bootstrap, one of those, and in the link we can manipulate around this. Yeah,
How could
element
we
in
do
this.
it without Bootstrap? If say like what I want is
Just link, yeah, to homepage equal and equal. Sorry.
you mean the import the link component from React Router doc?
Yeah, we can.
Got it.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Nope, all good. And then what do I need to add here to the link to make this link work? And if you're not sure, you can phone a friend.
Daniel will know.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so you can do a link to equals, and then you can put the quotes. You do the backslash because that would be your homepage. And then after that, you would do the arrow key, and then you just put homepage.
Sounds good. And let's do that for about as well. And let me go ahead and in fact use this in app.jsx. And so now I have a home page and I have an about page. There is a bit of a gotcha to be aware of here. If I don't have this slash up front, yeah, we don't see the issue come up here. As our nesting gets deeper, if there's a good chance to show it, I will. But sort of like Brandon was mentioning, if this was several layers deep, without the slash, instead of going to slash about, it would take me to like, if I was already over here, it would add on, which is a little hard to explain now without showing. But the short answer is when you're using a link, you always want to have the forward slash. So let's take 10. And then when we come back, we will add characters from the Game of Thrones API, and we'll see some patterns for that. And we'll use the React router, useParams, and useNavigate hook. Thank you very much, folks, and I'll see you all in 10 minutes. All right. So we've done a pretty solid review of React Router and setting up a project, and we have a home page and an about page. And we've kind of talked through and kind of reviewed some of the behavior of Outlet. And now we want to move on, and we want to build our actual application pages. And let's start with this characters page to get all the characters. And I've gone ahead and I made a really simple page here, all characters page and character page. And I'm just going to go ahead and make routes for them. So I'm going to import what I need. And everyone can see my screen, correct? Perfect. And I'm going to go ahead and make our routing objects. And the all characters is going to go on the path characters. And the individual character page is going to go on character /:ID. And we're going to see this show up in a minute. And this is how we're going to be able to have dynamic routing where the URL will change and we'll see a different ID in the URL for different characters. And our character component will be able to access that with the React router hook. And in fact, if I go over to my character page, let's see some of this in action. So let me go ahead and hop over to the character page, and let me over here, hop over to the app. And in fact, before I forget, let me just add links here to make it easier navigate around. All characters page. But as it happens, we can't really make a link to the individual character page. And we're going to have to see in a minute that we're going to want a link from there, from the list of all the different characters. But I can at least test this out. Note that character by itself gives me an error, but character /1 takes me to the character page, right? Because this path now has to include some value for this ID. And so this semicolon, it's like a variable that we're naming ID. And we're saying there has to be something in here. Now, React Router doesn't know what that something is, and it doesn't care. We're not enforcing that it has to be an actual number, but that's our intent with this code. So this is step one of using the useParams hook and setting up some dynamic routing. And I just want to check in and see if folks have any questions on this, on how to make your route dynamic. Murad, yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Where do you put the use param hook?
We have not used that hook yet. We're about to.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
you're good. And Erica, yes.
Why is the character ID not nested within the all characters page?
Because it is a separate route. This pay all characters page, when we get here, it's going to show a list of all the different characters. So we're going to see a whole bunch of characters. This page, and I think it'll help when we build it, is going to show us details on one character. Because let's say I really like Daenerys and I want to share Daenerys with you all. This way I have a link that I can share that you can open up to go straight to like Daenerys's profile page.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, good question. Eric, yes, sir.
I think it's in your header page or wherever you had the links. We're using a different syntax than we used yesterday for links. And I just dropped yesterday's syntax in the chat. I'm curious if we're actually using the
syntax that you dropped in the chat with link as, that's specific to Bootstrap.
Okay, I
Yeah,
see.
the example
That makes
yesterday
sense.
was actually something a bit different. That was an example of if I'm using like a Bootstrap navbar link, how can I actually use the React Router link component under the hood and keep the Bootstrap styling? This is the React Router link component right here, and how it works.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And someone else had a question as well. Tim, yes, sir.
Yeah, so Erica brought up a really good point about being nested. When would you nest something then if it's going to bring up a separate character page
I want to
anyway?
stay focused right now on showing how to use the useParam hook and dynamic routing. That's a bit of a larger design question that's a little out of scope.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And I apologize, folks. I do want to keep the ball rolling, so I am going to move on. So we've set this up. Now let's actually use that useParams hook on the character page. And the good news is this is super straightforward. We import it from React Router DOM, just like we would anything else. And I'm going to just make a variable named params. I'm going to call useParams. And I'm just going to print, or not print, excuse me, console.log params. And let's see what we get. And for some reason, the character page, I'm not sure why that popped up there. My apologies. And let's head over to the console and let's see what happens. So this is kind of cool. If you all look here in the console, let me make this a touch bigger. I can see that the name, and let me do a split here. The name that we gave this URL parameter or param is given to an object. So if I did have nesting, like to answer your question, Tim, maybe a character has a favorite foods page because there's thousands of foods, but maybe a character also has like episodes they are in, or then maybe it's like character battles.
Or they drink and they know things.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll see this more as we get into Django. But this is great because now I have access in my React app to whatever's in the URL bar as long as I've created a dynamic path by using semicolon to like create this variable. And note that this gives me an object. So let's destructure this object to just grab the bit that we care about, which is the ID. And now let's just print that. And I have ID up here. Let's change it just to 4. And so now I've got my character ID. And now all of a sudden I can start to do some interesting stuff, right? Like let's hop over to the Game of Thrones API. Let's look at what our GET request should look like to get a character info. And it looks like they have the URL right here. v2/characters. I hate that there's a capital C there. I don't know. I want to say it's not case sensitive, but I'm not actually 100%. And now we can use Axios to make an API call to get this character information. So I'm going to go ahead and import Axios. And can someone remind me what, if I'm going to make an API call, what do I need to also use so that React knows the order of things and knows when to make the API call and when to re-render the component? Daniel, yes, sir.
You have to do async, right?
We're going to have to do async. Absolutely. And in fact, let's make an async function right now. We'll call it get character, and it's going to be an async function. And I think what I'll do is we'll just make it look like this. And let's do const response equals Axios get, and this is going to be a tagged template literal. And I'm just going to copy this whole URL right here and put it right in there. But instead of 1, we're going to do ID. And let's just like maybe I'll just console.log response.data. And Daniel, now that I've made this async function, what do I want to do next? And why?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but don't you have to put await Axios
Oh,
get?
you're absolutely right. I apologize. We absolutely do need the await in front of Axios because Axios.get returns a promise. Thank you.
And to answer your question, do we have to do response.data.id?
To look at it, yes, we are going to have to do that. And I apologize, my question was a bit unclear. Where I was going with this is that we're going to want to use a useEffect hook and useState. And the useEffect is how we are going to call get character when the page loads. So let's use the useEffect hook. UseEffect takes 2 arguments. The first is an arrow function. The second is the dependency list of things useEffect will watch and call itself again if useEffect changes. Right now, we can just leave that empty, which means useEffect will fire when. When does this useEffect fire? Brandon, why? Yes, sir. So the useEffect actually fires right after the very first render. Right now, and it only fires once. So in fact, let's just define this get character async function in here inside my useEffect, since that's where we're going to need to use it. And let's go ahead and call it.
Wouldn't you need to put the ID there in the?
Yeah, we do. And that's where I was going next with this. So it's a little hard to show right now because with the page refresh, we don't see it in action. But we do need to put the ID here in the dependency list. Because what we really want is once we have an ID, we want this useEffect to fire to get the character. And in a minute, when we hook up some navigation from, say, the all character page, we'll see why this matters as well to make sure that we're getting the right character. So let me add this in now, and we'll come back to it later and kind of see its relevance. And so now I'm making an ID call, an API call to the Game of Thrones API. And if I didn't put a typo in the URL bar, there we go. and we're grabbing the data for the person that we want. And in fact, I think I'm going to go ahead and like code up something a little nicer looking so we can see a little bit of this data. I'm not going to get too fancy, but I do want to show a little bit of it. Chris, yes, sir.
Is all APIs data dictionaries are set up with IDs, image, and keywords as that? So yeah, so because that's the only way well, I guess we can always print it out what's there, but yeah, it just seems like ID and image and whatever descriptions are used often.
Yeah, that's a good question. ID is pretty common to pretty much everything because it's such a simple way of identifying stuff. Beyond that, it really depends on the kind of data, since both the APIs we've looked at thus far are for like game characters and television characters. That's why we see such similarity, but it can vary a ton. Like there's APIs for historical stock data, and the JSON object that you get back is going to have, a different shape with different properties for something like that.
Gotcha. I was just wondering. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. ID is super common. Tim, yes, sir.
Does it need to be named ID, or is that just the reference that you're calling it? Like, will it still pull the same data if it was named something else from the API? Or does it need to
So
be
you need
ID?
to look at the API docs, and the
Oh, okay,
API
I see.
sends back a JSON object, and it tells us, right, what keys are going to be on here.
So say I just wanted the first name, last name, and
You
that's
still
it.
have to make the API call to get all this information about Sam, and then you would just right here, like if we print response.data first name, I'm pretty sure we should get back Samuel Tarley. Yeah, so this is a little out of scope because this is stuff that we covered in the previous week with JSON
Yeah.
objects, but we're getting a JSON object back here in
Okay.
response.data. And the
Thank you.
JSON object we get back is what the API tells us it's going to give us. For sure. And in fact, we are going to be kind of coding that up right now, though I totally forgot a key step here, which is we need to create some React component state to hold this information. So I think I'm just going to call that state something like character. And we'll do set character. And we'll do use state, which will be null by default. And I'm not sure why I'm getting that funny thing right there. But now, in fact, and the way to Tim, to kind of answer your question, like what I do is I make an API call, I print out response.data, data comes from Axios. I look at the shape of the object just to make sure it's tracking with what the API docs tell me, and then I can see what's in here. And so now let's use set character to update it to response.data. And now over here, what I want to do, I should be able to do character dot.
I see. So
Let's do character
you
dot
call
format.
the API, and then from there, it basically tells you how you frame what data you need to get because it gives you the list.
The API sends back a JSON object.
Yeah, the JSON object. I mean, that's how you like frame what you're doing right now, right?
Well, the only data we have to work with is from what we get in the JSON object. So yes, that's what we have to use.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, those are good questions, but that is stuff that we've covered. So I just don't want to go too deep into it right now. And let's just get a little bit more info here and maybe family as well. So now we have details about Samuel Tarley, right? And if I grab someone else, let's see, what did I do wrong here? cannot read the following property, read full name on character page on line 24. So let's just comment that out for a sec and maybe do like a page refresh. Interesting. So I did something silly and something has now broken. Oh, in fact, what I did isn't silly at all, though it is a common gotcha. So let's talk about what just happened here. So I was coding along. My code was working great. And now it's not working, right? And if I refresh the page, what do I see? Well, I see this print statement from line 8, so I know I'm grabbing the ID, but I don't see my use effect firing. And I get this type error saying I can't find all this stuff, full name, last name, and so on. And so the problem here is that React is trying to render this before we made the API call to get the data. Right? And there's a couple solutions to this problem, I think. So I think, want to double check about if we need ID in here or not, but I think we can leave it there for the moment. What's also happening, if I read this error message carefully, cannot read properties of undefined. Because the default value here for use state is null. If I don't put anything in here, character is set to null. And let's just, for fun, let's console log it right here. If we scroll up here, character is null. And doing null.fullname is going to throw an error. One thing I can do is, instead of setting null as the default value in the use state, I can set it to an empty object. And so now, we might get, in fact, if we look at the console logs, we see that this component indeed renders twice, because I see this same character is console log on line 22 printed here and printed here. But that's okay, because it happens so fast. And now in JavaScript, if I try to access a property on an object that doesn't exist, I don't get an error. It doesn't break anything. It's just is null. So now, even though this doesn't render anything interesting, the code doesn't break. So this is actually really important to have the use state set to an empty object instead of null. The other way that we could do this, if we wanted to, is we could do what's called conditional rendering, where we could do some sort of check to see if the character exists or not, and if not, we return something else. Like I could do if character.id is null, render loading message if we haven't got the data yet. Maybe I'm just going to return, just like an H2 that says loading. And if I refresh the page, we see like very briefly the loading message, and then this renders. And I believe this happens every time. Yeah, regardless of whether this is here or not. There are some more advanced React patterns to kind of avoid the double load and have the React component wait to render until it has the data. But those are a little out of scope right now. And this solves our problem. Right, so the problem is the first time a component mounts and renders, it'll try to render, but it hasn't gotten the information from the API call. The solution is make sure that your default value for use state is something that won't break the render, or add some logic to render a loading message if we haven't gotten the data yet. All right, and I do want to show building out the all characters page so we can have a bit of work time, and I think we can get in like a good 40 minutes. So let me go ahead and code that up as well. So here we're going to need some use state. And we're going to need the use effect hook. And if I look at the Game of Thrones API, and we get, here's the API call to get all the characters. Let's try it out. Let's run it. Let's just grab that whole URL right there. And I'm just going to copy and paste this over here. So I've got use state, I've got use effect. So here's what I need to do. I need to create, actually, does someone maybe want to take a shot at walking us through this process? All right, let me just go ahead and code it up. We're going to need some state. We're going to call this characters, and it's going to be set characters. And it's going to be an empty array because if I look here, I see the JSON returned by here. It returns an array. And I know that I'm going to need to use a use effect hook. Sorry about that. Apologies. So let's use the use effect hook right here. I know that it's going to need to take an arrow function and a dependency list. In this case, the dependency list can be empty because we don't need to watch anything. We just need this to fire once when the component loads. And I know inside here, I need to create my async function to make the API call. So I'm going to need to import Axios. And I can follow the exact same pattern I did before and make an arrow function and Axios. I indeed need to use await, and we'll do Axios get. And let's see if I've still got that URL right there. And let's just console log response.data to make sure that I haven't done anything silly and that this works. So if I hop over here, let's go to all characters page and clear this and refresh the page. And of course, it would help if I actually called the function. And now we get an API call that returns a JavaScript array with all these objects with all of our characters. And just like we did before, I know that inside my getCharacters async function, I need to update the React component state to hold that data. So we'll do response.data. And now here, if I console log that React component state, I should see that list of all the characters. And let's comment out that old console log that we don't need. And indeed we do. And I see the data is coming back. And so here, let's return something a bit more interesting. Let's wrap this in a fragment. Let's check if we have anything in that characters array. And if we do, let's do characters.map. And we'll do C for character, I for index. And just for now, just to get this going, I'm just going to do like a div and we'll say c dot full name. And I need to add over here, if we don't get the character, let's just add a loading message. And we're going to flesh this out a bit because I actually want to create a card for my characters that will show characters more nicely. But this has gotten the ball rolling. Let me go ahead and make a character card component. And we'll call it character card.jsx. And what we're going to do is I'm going to hop over to Bootstrap and I'm going to look at their example of a card, which does exactly what I want. It shows an image, it has a title, it has some text, it has a button. And I'm literally just going to copy that code. And in fact, I think I will just copy the import statements to make my life even easier. And this is like the only time when I would say copying code is okay. Because in this case, I just want a basic card and I want it the way Bootstrap does it because I really like how they do it. And I'm going to run this format document command and get rid of that extra parentheses to make sure that everything is looking okay. So I think this is looking okay. Now I need to pass in the character info. So let's do it like that. And let's just do a quick console log. And we'll just say character card, character. And we'll print that out. Just to make sure that this, I'm going to be able to use this correctly. And now if I go over here, let's try using this character card component that we just created. And we need to set a key to the index so that React can tell each card in the array separate. And for character, we pass in C with that JSON information about the character. And if we hop over here, so I haven't used it, but the card renders, which is a good start. And I see this printed out a whole bunch of times that tells me that I got the information that I need into there. So that's a good start too. So now we can start building this out. And I'm just going to open up one of these so I can add stuff. So I think the title should be the character's name. So let's do character.fullName. And the image should definitely not be a placeholder. It should be an image from or of the character. So let's do character.image URL. And now let's get maybe some basic description information of the character in there. I think we'll just do maybe like family and title here in the card text. So we'll do something like this. Family, character family, title, character title. And now what we want is we want this button to go somewhere so that when I click on it, I go to the character detail page. That would be really nice, right? Now we've seen how to do this with a link. I could import link from React Router DOM, and I could add a link here, and we could do two, and it would go to a template literal that would look something, it would look something like this, character slash character.id. And view details. And let's see if this works. And indeed, I made a mistake here. And this is sort of what Brandon was mentioning earlier. Let's look at the URL And let's look at this link and see what happens and talk about what's wrong and how to fix it, because this is a common gotcha. If I click on view details, I didn't go to character/0. It was added to the URL that already existed. And the reason that happened is because I forgot to put a slash at the beginning. So when you're making routes for links, it's really important to put that slash at the beginning. And now that works for us. Brandon, yes, sir.
Could you also just omit the /character/ and it would do the same thing? So like rather than write more, you could write less. It's just
You mean get rid of this?
yeah, I mean, I don't see why that wouldn't do the same thing, right?
Oh, that would take us to like, so this would take us to just /ID. If we removed this slash, it would take us to characters, which is where we already are, /ID, which is what we don't want. We want character
Oh,
/ID.
okay, my bad. Okay.
Yeah, no worries. It's a good question. And also these different paths start to become a lot more relevant as we learn to build our own APIs later on with Django, where there's just like if you Google REST API, there's a whole set of sort of like rules and standards to follow. So that's the other reason to design it in this particular way. And let's see, it looks like, what did I do silly here? Oh, I forgot to close out my link. So this is nice, but what we really want is, let's see how we could do this as a button instead. Mainly to demonstrate useNavigate, but also because there are other times when we have to use useNavigate to actually redirect the user, like if someone logs in or logs out. So I'm going to import the useNavigate hook from React Router DOM. And the way I use it is I actually call it right off the bat. And it returns this object with a bunch of functions on it called navigate for me. And then what I can do is, and my apologies, because I just want to make sure I get this right with how to use navigate. I think the simplest way to do it is we can write a little function. So let's just write a function named like navigate to, and it's going to take in a character ID, and we're going to call navigate, and then as an argument, what we just pass in is the URL that we want to navigate to. So character /ID. So useNavigate hook returns this object, this function rather, navigate, that we call, and we pass it the route, the path we want to navigate to. And I'm just writing a little helper function here to do that. So that what I can do here is we can do like on click, and in fact, I don't even need to pass in. Let's just make this character ID right there. And we can just get rid of that argument. And in fact, let's make this a little more detailed, the name, so the name is a little clearer. And then here in the on-click, we just pass navigate to character page. And we can just say like view details. And now, fingers crossed, we can use the useNavigate hook. So that's useNavigate. We could have used the link here, but I wanted to demonstrate it, and there will be other times where you will want to use useNavigate because you will want to actually drive the user and navigate the app around. So we covered a lot of ground there. I apologize that we ran a bit long because I know it ate into the work time. Let me pause the recording and then we can kind of discuss what we want to do next. All right, so we got a little bit of hands-on time with React Router and useNavigate and use hooks. And we built out a lot of our Game of Thrones app. And let me stop and restart the dev server. And my apologies. I was doing some demonstration code. And let's just finish our cleanup. And just to recap, we did an awful lot of good work. We have the home page, the about page, things that we're familiar with in Router. We learned about dynamic routing, where I can set essentially a parameter in my path or URL with the semicolon, and then this being basically a variable name. So now if I go to characters and I hit view details, this URL character 0 loads Daenerys or Samwell and so on. And we saw how on the individual character page, I can use the useParams hook from React Router DOM to grab all of these URL params, right? And this grabs the ID. It returns an object and the property is named ID because that's what we named it in router.jsx. And then we use the pattern that we're getting more familiar with the useEffect hook to make an async function to do an HTTP GET request with Axios to get our character data, assign it to the component state for the individual character, which will then re-render. And we even did some conditional rendering where we say, hey, if we haven't gotten this character yet, load. Because we found out that, hey, if my default value for this character state isn't an object, or and in fact, I'll just do if character null or character ID is null isn't an object. If I try to like see if an object property exists like character ID, it's going to throw an error that breaks. So I need to check if it even is an object, or even better, let's make it an empty object. But this conditional rendering is still useful, and then we return our individual character information. We also saw how on the characters page, with the character card that we created, we can use the useNavigate hook as an alternative way, another tool in the toolbox to navigate around with React Router. We've already seen React Router's link component. And now we've learned, hey, if I need to, like when the user clicks a button, navigate somewhere else, or maybe, you know, when something else happens, navigate the user to somewhere else, I can use the useNavigate hook and call navigate. And we wrote a little helper function to do that, to navigate to the particular page. So the next thing that we want to build, if we go back to our TL draw design, is the favorites page. If we go all the way over here, floating around here somewhere, is favorites, right? I want to be able to favorite a character and then have a list of those favorited characters. But it'd be really useful to like have that information and be able to share it throughout the app. Like it'd be kind of cool if maybe the header also showed like how many people are in the favorites list. It'd be cool if like when you're looking at a character, the favorite button, you know, if they were already favorited, it would say unfavorite. Same over here when we're looking at all characters. So, you know, if we go to our component tree, it means I probably want my favorites information to live up here, and let's make this, we'll make it red. My list of favorites, right? Because I know that I'm going to need it on the favorites page. And let's add the favorites page to our component tree now. And this is characters. We'll add character ID for an individual character page. And let's add a favorite. And to reiterate, what I want is like over here, I want, favorites has 5 people. And I want to see that on all my pages. And, I want a little like favorite button. But I want the button to, maybe show if this person is favorite or unfavorited, so that the button can be like a better user experience. And I apologize that the UI of this is kind of terrible, but hopefully you all kind of get the idea here. And I want the same thing on the characters page. I want that favorite, unfavorite button. And I need it over here too. So I need it in a number of places. And the good news is we have this character card, but we need to pass this data around. So although on first glance, it might seem like really the React component state with the favorites list, we only need to keep it here. It really needs to be up here in the app, right? Because I want to be able to pass down into header the total number of favorites. And then like on the all characters page, it needs to be able to grab some information about if like each individual character is favorited or not. It might be nice to see it here too. And in fact, then the favorites page also needs to know. So how can I accomplish this? And there's a couple challenges here. And one of the big challenges is all these different components get rendered by the outlet. So, normally I could, up here, I would maybe do const favorites, set favorites, and make it a bit of use state and have it be an empty array to start with. Let me make sure I've imported use state. Yep. And I could pass this down as a prop. I could do like favorites equals favorites. I'm not even sure if this works with the outlet component. And then I also need to do this for all these other pages. Like here, we need to pass down, like this would have to accept favorites as a prop and so on. And when you have like a lot of layers where I have to pass a prop down through like 3 or 4 components deep in the tree, that's called prop drilling, and it can become a real pain. Also, again, with the outlet, I'm actually not sure if outlet works that way. I'd have to check the docs. But luckily, React has a solution for this. It's called React Context. And React Router uses it with something called outlet context. And that's what we're going to see now. And let me just make sure I got rid of my sort of the code that I don't want. So what we're going to do is up here, what context basically does is we've actually kind of seen it already with the router provider. And if we look in the component tree for React, we see like all of these components named provider. So what the provider does is the provider handles the work of passing something down as props for us, in essence. And so that's why all of these other child components can use all of this React router DOM stuff. That's why this link component works. That's why useParams and stuff works, because way up at the parent level, there's a router provider for React router DOM. And it does this through something called React Context. And we can create our own context in React, which we can maybe look at later. But React Router has done that for us for the outlet. So what we're going to do is create a bit of context and pass that to outlet. And then everything inside outlet can access it with a hook. Like with everything else in React, it's all done through hooks. And in fact, if I scroll down here and we find the useOutletContext hook, we can take a quick look at what it looks like. So what we're going to do is modify the outlet. So we're not going to write like a favorites prop. We're going to use this prop that React Router has created called context. And it takes an object, and we can put whatever we want in the object. And then anything that's rendered by outlet, right? Anything that becomes a child of outlet can use that hook to grab the context object, which can have whatever data or logic or functions we put in it. And let me hop back over here to this other diagram where we can see here, useOutletContext. And then it's kind of in action. Or excuse me, that's useOutletContext. And then we see it in action right here. Brandon, yes, sir.
Yeah, so you mentioned also adding some navigation functionality to show like how many favorites are in the favorites list. But the nav bar is not a child of outlet. So would you have to, instead of using context, pass favorites in as a param?
Exactly. And that's exactly what we're going to do.
Okay.
Yeah, you're correct. Favorites is going to, in fact, get passed in as both. And actually, I think that's a great starting point. Let's modify our header to accept. Let's just pass in the whole favorites array. Why not? Just for consistency. And we'll have to make the favorites page in just a moment. But let's do favorites, number people in favorites is going to be favorites.length. And fingers crossed that should actually work and just show us 0 if I go back to the home page. So it looks like I may have just made a typo along the way. Cannot read properties of undefined, probably because I forgot the next step, which is we actually need to pass favorites in as a prop, like you were saying. Favorites equals favorites. And there we go. So there's nobody in our favorites list, right? Not very exciting at the moment. And let's go ahead and let's make a favorites page. Let's add it to the router, and Command P lets me jump between files. And my apologies, I didn't follow my own naming convention with the favorites page and just called it favorites, but that's okay for now. And we might as well, I believe I already updated the link. So let's just double check that this works. Indeed, it does. I can navigate around. There's no one in favorites, but it's now there and it exists. So let's use the React router outlet context so that we can pass the favorites information around, and we can also pass the logic that we need to add someone to the favorites list. So I'm going to make a function named add to favorites. It's going to take in character info, and it is going to call set favorites. And I'm not going to make the same mistake I did yesterday of not destructuring my arrays properly. And we're going to add that character to the favorites list. Now, down the line, don't double add character is a to-do, remove character function, but we'll tackle those later. Let's see how we can use outlet context. So it's already there as a prop, and I just need to pass in an object. And inside that object, I'm going to pass in the list of favorites and this add to favorites function that I've created that just bundles up some common logic for me. And since these are both at the same level, just like you were saying, Brandon, I can pass in the favorites array as a prop to header, and through context, pass it into the outlet. So here's the cool thing about context. We can use it in any component that gets rendered inside outlet as a child. And if I go to, say, the all characters page, we see outlet is here, all these other providers. We hit the all characters page, and then we have our character card component, right? And if I'm to update my tree, let me go ahead and do a little drawing, and we'll make that black, and we'll make it like that. And let's just make another diamond. That would look like that, right? And it would say character card. And there'd be a whole bunch of these, right? I'm only going to do 2, but we'd have a bunch of character cards that are children. And these are a little squished, but that's okay, right? Both of these are children of the all characters page, which means they're children of the outlet that renders them, which means we can use outlet context in the character card, which is awesome. There are a couple ways to do it. We can do it here. If we wanted to, we could also do it on the all characters page. I would say there's trade-offs to both approaches. Depending on the situation, one isn't necessarily right. For teaching purposes, I do want to show it here on the character card. The one advantage to doing it on the all character page is there's just less use of outlet and context. But let's see it on the character card just to see what this looks like in action, because it is kind of cool. And let me close out some stuff. And as a reminder, this character card renders an individual character, right? And we're going to use this on the favorites list as well. So the character card is what we're looking at right here. So in addition to the useNavigate hook, we're going to import the useOutletContext hook from React Router DOM. And I'm going to call it right here below useNavigate. And it returns an object that I'm going to destructure, and I'm going to get the favorites list and add to favorites. Like so. And I think what I want to do is I want to find out if this person is, well, first, let's add them to the favorites list. That's probably a good starting point. So let's make a button. And in fact, I'm just going to copy this button. And on click, we will add to favorites, and let's just throw all of the character information in there. So the whole JavaScript object that we got back from the API. Right. And I think what I want to do as well, and let me close some of these other ones out, is in app, let's just add a console log here. So we can see the favorites. Because we need to make the favorites page, but I love being able to debug through console log and test through console logging. So I'm going to refresh the page for my own sanity. Favorites list is empty, which is what we would expect. I'm going to actually very quickly just comment out the console log that we no longer need. That is just kind of making the console messy. And let's see if when I click on add to favorites, if our favorites list gets updated. And look at that. We've got Daenerys. We've got Sam. And we've got John. Now, the problem is I can keep adding John to the favorites list, but that's something that we will fix in time. Right? And so now, all of a sudden, making the favorites page becomes a whole lot simpler. And if I kind of take a look at the all characters page, there's all this use effect stuff that I don't really care about. This stuff is going to be basically the same. And in fact, let's just maybe copy this code. And let's go to the favorites page and put it in. And we're going to do a little modification as we go, and we'll talk about it as we do. So it's going to be an array of objects. I'm just going to be calling that array favorite. I'm going to want to import my character card. And apologies for the jump there. I just wanted to do a little formatting. And so now we have an array of objects. We map through it, and we render each one as a character card to show that character. If there's nothing in the array, we say no favorites in list. So right now I should be able to go to favorites and let's see, what did I do wrong here? I wonder if I did something wrong in my routing. So let's take a quick look at router.jsx. It is indeed favorites with a slash at the end. Let's take a look in header to see if I got that link wrong. I think that should be okay. But, oh, favorites is not defined, of course. I got ahead of myself. This object doesn't even exist. It's throwing an error. When it throws an error, React Router actually will catch that error and take us to the not found page. And that's why I got confused. So I need to fix this in my code, but it was actually React Router doing that. And again, we're going to use useOutletContext from React Router down. And we're going to get the list of favorites from outlet context. And now I see no favorites in list, and that error goes away. Right. So again, just to kind of recap what we're doing here, favorites, this red star, right? This is the context. Everything inside outlet has access to that outlet context. And because what React Router does is render stuff inside the outlet, all those children and their children's children through the context hook have access to whatever we put in that object. The favorites list, add favorites, remove favorites, and so on. So that's the fundamental concept of outlet context. And you can see where it can provide a lot of value because it's another way to share data around my application. It helps avoid prop drilling, as I might have to pass a prop through like 4 or 5 layers of components. And even more importantly, it lets me pass information into the stuff that React Router renders, that gets rendered by the outlet. And so again, we see number of people have favorites. Let's add someone to favorites. Let's add Sam. And now, fingers crossed, I should be able to go to the favorites page, and I see Daenerys and Sam. And I just want to pause and check in and see what questions folks have, or what might be good to go over again, because this is an excellent time to do that. Because this is the fundamental concept of outlet context. And from here on out, really the only things I would demo would be the logic of changing this button based on if someone is in the favorites list or not, and stuff like that. That's more about adding more JavaScript logic, but we don't have to really make any other changes to context. We might pass in an additional function to remove a character. And in fact, I'll show you all what that looks like here in app.jsx. Let's do const remove from favorites. I'm just going to have this sort of be a mock function. Actually, it would look something like this. Set favorites, filter. Oh, I'm so sorry. Filter favorites. And in fact, this is going to be better as a multi-line arrow function. What we can do here is updated favorites equals favorites.filter f if the ID of someone does not equal the character that we want to remove. And then we would just set favorites to updated favorites. I need to double check that I have my Boolean logic here correct. I always get a little twisted up on that one. But now that I've written this function, I would just pass it in right here. And in fact, let's go to the character page. And let's just write a little function to see if someone's in the favorites or not. And it's honestly going to be very similar to the logic that we just did. So const is in favorites. What we're going to do is we're just going to take that favorites array. We're going to filter it. We're going to look to see if there's someone in there already that has the same ID as our character. Filter returns an array. So we're going to do dot length, right? And this should either return, and then we're going to cast the whole thing to a Boolean, which there's a couple of different ways to do it, but that's one way. And let's see if this works or not. And let me refresh the page to get a fresh start. So no one is in favorites. And let's add Daenerys. So indeed, someone is in favorites and a dollar says it's Daenerys. And so now I can start to get a little fancy. And I'm going to add a little bit of conditional rendering logic here. And we're going to say, if they're in the favorites, we're going to do one thing. If they're not in the favorites, we're going to do another. So this is like a giant ternary statement. And in fact, I think the easiest way to do this is let's make a little function to do this work for us. And we'll call it render favorites button. And let's just say if is in favorites, right? And if someone is already in the favorites, we want to remove from favorites that we pass in through this outlet context. So we can we've passed in another function. And we want to say remove from favorites. Otherwise, they're not in the favorites yet, and we want to add them. And there's definitely a way to clean this up. But this is actually not the worst way to do it. And I realize I just did a lot of stuff here. So just to recap, I wrote a little function. Its only job is if is in favorites is true, we return one button that says remove from favorites and uses this remove from favorites function. If is in favorites is false, we're going to instead return a button that would add them to the favorites. And I did this really for my own readability so that over here, I can just do render favorites button, right? And this is another pattern for conditional rendering. And fingers crossed, I can now add and remove Daenerys from my favorites array. And I can see this show up. And the cool thing is, because we did this in the character card component, if we hop over to the favorites list, look at that. We see the same thing. Okay, so I know I said I was going to check in and do questions, then I went on for like another 10 minutes. But hopefully that was good to see. We did run a bit long, but now really is the perfect time for questions or things about outlet context to review, whether it is the logic of this button or how outlet context works conceptually or how I use it. So what's on people's minds? What questions do folks have, or what parts of the code would you all like to see again? And if we're feeling good about this, then that's even better. We did run a bit long. Let me go ahead and stop the recording and take a couple more questions.